All right, welcome back, Social 10. We want you to be able to leave here today knowing more about thesis statements. In the month of September, our focus had been A1s. By the end of the month of September, we moved on to the A2 writing assignment, beginning with the analysis of source. Last week was our first week working on the response to source part by doing some research. Today we're going to be looking at the next logical step here in building how to do an A2 by looking at what is the thesis statement. So in your notes, if you're taking some notes, you could write down the title for today, Notes about Thesis Statements. But again, the document I'm about to share with you here will be on your Google Classroom as well. All of this that we're about to see is also there. And just for reference, I do have our A2 source on the board as well, just so we have some kind of source to use as a basis. The first thing I must stress is that in order to build a thesis statement, you need to understand what is it that I'm responding to. And that's a part of that exercise that we've already done called the analysis of source. When you analyze the source, you have to identify what we call the big rocks. Now, what are the big rocks the source is talking about? So I would say that the first step in developing a thesis statement is to, again, make sure you have identified the key rocks, the big rocks of the source. These are the talking points that have been introduced. The source is a beginning of a conversation with you. And in order for you to continue that conversation, you need to be talking about the same talking points. So this conversation that's been introduced to you, it includes ideas like common challenges. So somewhere in your thesis statement, either explicitly or implicitly, you need to address common challenges. That's one of the big rocks of your thesis statements because it's a part of the conversation your thesis is a part of. Also included in this source would be ideas like scarcity and diversity and unity. These are other big rocks that you could either explicitly include into your thesis or somehow implicitly connect them there. But the first step in creating a thesis statement is to understand, what am I responding to? And you've done that in the analysis of source part of the essay already. You've identified those big rocks. But now we need to build a thesis statement that either explicitly or implicitly connects to those rocks. The fear is that you will analyze the source and then you'll write an essay that has nothing to do with the source. It's very tangential, or it might even be off topic. One way to ensure that you remain on topic is to create a response using the language that is in the source. So that's the first step of thesis creation, is to consider, identify those big rocks. Here there are words like scarcity and diversity, this idea of common challenges, and the source is offered a path as a solution. Interdependence will build global unity. That's what you're responding to now. Any questions about step one? The language will change as we will face new sources later in this year. The language will change in 20 and 30, but this step will remain the same. As you're about to create a thesis statement, first thing, what am I making it about? What are the big rocks here? And then you kind of assemble those big rocks and you see, how would I like to respond to the arguments presented? I have a few more tips though. Step two talks about where to place your thesis statement. Some students want to place it in the conclusion. Some students want to write an essay where it's more of an exploratory essay, where they arrive at their argument in the end as a conclusion. That is not the type of essay we are writing in social studies. We are not writing an exploratory essay. We are writing a defensive position essay. So not only does your thesis statement need to be a statement and not a question, but your thesis statement needs to be at the end of your introduction, at the end of your analysis, not left for the end of your paper. So in your paper, you're going to analyze the source, and that at the end of the analysis, after you've done the division of society part, proponents of the voice behind the source would argue this, opponents would argue this. Logically, now we want to know, what do you think? Before the body, we want you to end that introduction with this is your thesis. Now, before you do your thesis statement, you could internalize the tension created by the source by asking some questions, but ultimately answer those questions through your statement. So you have a statement, not a state question, right? It's a thesis statement, not a thesis question. So in social studies, in a defensive position essay, it's not an exploratory essay with a thesis question, it's a thesis statement, and please have it at the last sentence of your introduction of your analysis. That's where it belongs. That's where it belongs. So we're using a statement because it's not an exploratory essay. We're taking a position and we're going to defend it through the body of the paper. We're going to allow your position to be now the driving force behind the essay. That's what should drive your essays, is your argumentation. It's hard to do that if you wait until your conclusion to state what you think. So the next point that I have up here is place your thesis statement at the end of the intro, the end of the analysis. Any questions about the placement of it? And again, the third point that I have up here is it needs to be a statement, not a question. I've had students in the past that ask a question. A question isn't as forceful. It isn't as convincing. So you're going to see your argumentation mark drop if your argument is a question and not a statement. So you can ask, thoughtful questions to show that you're internalizing that struggle, the tension that has been introduced by the source, but ultimately answer that with your thesis statement and then develop your thesis in your body. Step 4. Speaking of the body now, your thesis statement will provide focus and structure for your body. Often your thesis statement can be subdivided into smaller arguments. The one that we're considering today is, although scarcity is our most immediate challenge, we must be careful how it is defined and avoid the temptation to use homogenization to address it. So that's a thesis statement, but it's easily divided into 3 sections. So body section 1, body paragraph 1, scarcity is our most immediate challenge. That might be your topic sentence. And the purpose of that body paragraph will be to explore that position, to offer supporting arguments and evidence. And then body paragraph 2, we must be careful how we define scarcity. That's your topic sentence. And throughout body paragraph 2, you're going to offer supporting argumentation and evidence to continue that position. And then argument 3, in order to avoid the temptation, we must avoid the temptation to use homogenization to address scarcity. There's your topic sentence, and now that gives you focus and structure for your third section of your body. So, this point on thesis creation is that depending upon your wording of your thesis, it should provide focus and structure for your body to come. I'm going to do this, this, and this. What is a thesis statement? It's a promise. A thesis statement is a promise to the reader. I'm going to do this, this, and this. Therefore, if that was your promise, although scarcity is our most immediate challenge, we must be careful how it is defined and avoid the temptation to use homogenization to address it. If that's your promise you make to me and you leave one of those 3 subdivided arguments out, maybe you forget to talk about it, we must be careful how we define scarcity, then your essay is incomplete. You have not fulfilled your promise. So your goal by the end of this week is to figure out what your promise is going to be. What is your thesis statement going to be? So then you can focus for the rest of October to developing that body to defend that thesis. So, back to the point, we need to have a thesis statement that gives us something to talk about in the body. Sometimes students will write down a thesis statement and then I'll walk by and they'll be paralyzed and I'll ask them, what's happening? And they'll be like, well, I don't know what to write next. Look back to your promise that you gave me. Your thesis statement is your promise. You need to now fulfill your promise. You said you're going to do this, this, and this. Do those things. If you can't do those things, give me a different promise. So by the end of this week, you need to figure out what is the promise you're going to be able to keep on this essay. What is the position you're going to be able to defend in response to the big rocks that the source has presented to you. And that's shown here in step 5. Now I've got lots of possible thesis statements. I think I have 16 or so in addition to the one that's on the side board offered in this document. And each one of these is a response to the big rocks of the source, and it allows us to subdivide our body into smaller arguments. Although scarcity is our most immediate challenge, the protection of diversity will be key if we are to achieve the global unity necessary in order to address all of our common challenges. Body paragraph 1, scarcity is our most immediate challenge. Body paragraph 2, protection of diversity is key. Maybe body paragraph 3, it's going to be key to do all these other common challenges as well. So each one of these proposed thesis statements can be subdivided. Our most immediate challenge today is our loss of diversity. This has not only had a negative impact on us culturally, but it has also had a negative impact on our planet. Although global unity would be an ideal path to address it, we cannot afford to wait. So there's a thesis statement that is a response to the big rocks of the source and gives us many body paragraphs. Most immediate challenge, loss of diversity. That's body paragraph 1. But we can also talk about it culturally, and we can talk about it ecologically or biologically, right? So we can talk about the loss of cultural diversity and the loss of biological diversity. So there's 2 separate paragraphs there. And then we have this paragraph that, global unity would be ideal, but it's not happening, so we need to do something else. Global unity might be ideal, but it's not happening, so we need another path. That might be 4 body paragraphs in response to the source. So you need to pick a thesis statement that allows you an opportunity to show that you have comprehensively internalized the source and that you have precisely responded to it. Don't pick what appears to be the simplest thesis statement, because if you give me a simple argument with simple evidence, you're going to get a very limited mark. Challenges can become the catalyst for corrective changes needed to transform and elevate our species. Instead of attempting to preserve the flawed cornerstones that have created our current global village, we must allow this paradigm to collapse and then rebuild with more sustainable cornerstones. Again, a totally different thesis statement, same conversation. Different subdivided arguments. So in that body, challenges can become the catalyst for corrective changes needed to transform or elevate our species. You might have a general paragraph about that. And then another paragraph about instead of attempting to preserve our flawed cornerstones, we've created, so these are our flawed cornerstones, and now instead of fixing them, we need to let it collapse and rebuild with these new ones. Now that's an essay that you might be prepared to write sooner than later. So another thing I'm going to ask you to do today is to consider these thesis statements that I began to present to you and see which one really speaks to what your response to the source would be. You don't have to pick any of these. You can pick your own. But by Thursday, I want to see your thesis statement. So, in summary, what is a thesis statement? It's a response to the source. So, how do we make sure it's on topic? We take the language from the source, the big rocks, and we either explicitly or implicitly refer to them in your thesis. Where does the thesis go? It goes at the end of your analysis, the end of your introduction. What does it look like? It's a statement, not a question. What does it look like? It's subdividable, that it will set up focus and structure for your body. It is the most important sentence of an essay. And I need you to leave here today understanding more about it. Any questions about thesis statements? All right, I'm going to stop recording this part.